Welcome to our midweek Lenten Bible studies. Over the next few weeks, we're going to be examining the gospel readings for the upcoming gospel readings during Year B of Lent. Lent began last week on Ash Wednesday, and this past Sunday, the first Sunday in Lent, the story went back to the first chapter of Mark, and it was the story essentially retelling of Jesus' baptism and of his experience in the wilderness and then his movement to Galilee. This week we jump ahead to the middle section of the gospel, to the 8th chapter, and we begin with Jesus' first passion prediction. There's actually 3 of them that will follow in chapters 8, the first one, chapter 9, the second, and chapter 10, the third. In the second passion prediction, when Jesus announces it, the disciples begin to argue with one another about who's the greatest. In the third passion prediction, it's the brothers James and John who approach Jesus about sitting at Jesus' left hand and right hand. And of course, in the 8th chapter, this coming Sunday's gospel reading, shortly after confessing that Jesus is the Messiah, the Son of the living God, then Jesus goes about telling about what will happen in Jerusalem, that he will suffer and die. And Peter says, "God forbid it," and Jesus responds, "Get behind me, Satan." Mark's story is a story, and it's best listened to. And those who are listening to it are given inside information much the same way that the narrator would. Listening to Mark as a story is kind of like listening to a soap opera. You know sort of where the story's headed, where it's going, whereas the characters in the story do not. But throughout the story, you begin to attach yourself to a character or characters, and in the end, when you're confronted with the empty tomb, it's almost as if you're left with the same predicament as the women. In the original ending of Mark's gospel that ends at 16:8, the women left the tomb in fear and they said nothing to anyone. After this week, we're going to be moving into John's gospel for the next 3 Sundays. Next week, we'll hear the story in the 2nd chapter of John of Jesus cleansing the temple of the money changers. Ironically, this happens at the beginning of John's gospel story, whereas in Matthew, Mark, and Luke, the cleansing of the temple happens during what we call Holy Week. 2 weeks from this Sunday, we'll hear the story of Nicodemus, and of course it includes the most famous passage, New Testament passage of Scripture, John 3:16. But Nicodemus is a Pharisee. He's smitten with Jesus, but he's somewhat afraid because he comes to Jesus at night. We can't be too hard on Nicodemus because in the end, John's gospel tells us that Nicodemus came and assisted Joseph of Arimathea in taking Jesus' body down from the cross. But that'll be in 2 weeks. In 3 weeks, sandwiched in between the story of the raising of Lazarus and the triumphant entry of Jesus into Jerusalem, we have an encounter with Jesus and a few of his disciples just as they've come into the holy city, and as they are confronted there with the crowds that are confessing that Jesus is the Messiah, and they're shouting their hosannas. Jesus begins to talk about his impending death, and he refers to it, his death and dying, as a seed that's planted in the ground. And then the final week before Easter is Palm Sunday, and on that Sunday, during worship, we hope to be able to pull off a reading of a narrative reading of the Passion of Jesus. So each Wednesday night at 7 p.m., I hope you'll join us for our Lenten Bible study. You can join us on Zoom. Please request on either Facebook or on our YouTube channel. In the description of this video, there's a way that you can contact me so that you can access our Zoom Bible study. And I hope you'll do that. I hope you'll have a great evening. Bye-bye.